Internalized classism refers to the process by which a person's experience as a member of the poor or working class becomes internalized and influences their self-concept and self-esteem, as well as their relationships with others. Classism is an issue that has been prevalent for as long as society has existed. Although we have made strides over time in regards to the rights people should have and changed our outlook on many of our previous ideals, we still have a long way to go before this issue is resolved. Classism is defined as when those with elements such as income, wealth, status, and political power are used to oppress those who don't have those attributes. The distinction between class and classism lies with the oppression that goes along with the position of power these elements give a person in society. The canonical example is having access to money. The implications of the effects of classism can be expressed with this quote. With respect to classism in particular, the internalization of the experiences of being poor or working class has implications for a person's self-concept and self-esteem. The upper class tends to be the dominant majority and determine what is normal and acceptable. Since the upper class is part of the dominant group, they are typically the ones who establish these norms and hold most of the power when it comes to pushing society in new directions. Being aware of this and how they affect society is important to knowing where issues can arise and how the structure of society can influence the voice of the people. One study concluded that aspects of internalized oppression are not intrinsic properties of the individual, nor are they intrinsically associated with the characteristic that is targeted for oppressions, such as being female or a person of color or being poor. Rather, much of the internalized oppression results more or less directly from an individual's exposure to systemically negative social conditions. It is the experience of those negative social conditions that is internalized by the person. What this implies is that over time, systemic oppression in any form, including but not limited to classism, is internalized by the person, similar to how a virus affects how a person sees themselves and how they act. It can become normalized to them. This is not to say that the issues end there either, as there are other tangible issues that arise in the structure of society that prevent people from rising up. Classism has always been an issue in society. Perhaps it is simply the mark of a society itself, in that the class is built into how we structure our society. It might be easy to think of a world without classism, one that everyone simply follows the golden rule of treating each other how you would want to be treated yourself. But that is analogous to wanting to find a cure for cancer. It's not as simple as it seems. Classism, like cancer, is a problem that presents itself in a wide array of fashions, and it would be naive to think that there is one all-encompassing cure for that problem. If we go back to the most basic form of a society, we can see that from the beginning, communities and societies were built on the foundation of social structure. There was a person or group of people in power and different levels of authority and control given to the rest of the members of that society. The benefits of this sort of system is that it allows for regulation and order, and in a utopia, that would be the end of the story. But when a system is put in place, eventually people will try to exploit it, and every modern society since then has some sort of variation of this type of systemic oppression ever since. In the time of kings, it was a combination of wealth and political power that gave them absolute control over entire regions and countries. Sometimes religion would come into play, and these positions of power would exploit the system of religion to gain political power. An example would be India. The caste system was widely used, and divisions between the classes were not subtle. It was impossible to move up in the world, and the lower in class you were, the less basic human rights you had. In terms of how all of this relates to the US today, we can see that we clearly have made progress in the long term, a historical sense. Most citizens have basic human rights protected by law, and public opinion on classism is generally in favor of equality among all. This does not mean that the issue of classism is by any means gone, however. Although it is less blatant now than it was in the past, oppression through classism still has a hold on our society. Upper class people define what's normal, acceptable, and intelligent. Their ideas, values, and cultures form the canon of what is considered high-class culture, as compared to low-class or popular culture. This quote is from Is Everyone Really Equal by Oswald Sensoy, and it emphasizes the main issues that permeate American society. The upper class, which previously would have been labeled as the ruling class, have the power to shape our society simply because they have the influence and resources to do so. This, in some sense, is built into society, as money and power can always buy you access and automatically just gives you a platform. It's not all about money, though, as culture comes into play as well. Depending on how cultures are depicted and how prevalent those that represent those cultures are in positions of power, determine what is considered socially acceptable. There may not be a way to completely solve the issues that arise with classism in the United States, but I think that in addition to the long-term solutions that people have proposed in the past, we should also focus our efforts on making small changes within our own social circles and our communities. This sort of small movements are what are necessary to change the narrative, the stereotypes, the prejudice, and eventually the oppression. One such action would be to teach about these types of issues of society as early as elementary school. Typically, this type of topic is not discussed in detail in the classroom or until high school or college even. And even if it is talked about, it's often oriented towards a historical approach or just superficial concepts. This is done as the mindset of society currently is to, in some sense, pretend that these issues aren't as problematic as they are. The approach in schools is to not really draw attention to it and hope that in doing so the next generation won't internalize those ideas. This approach will not work, as we are all in a society that is structured in that sort of way already. I would propose that making the issues that we have in society commonly known and make it not something to hide. One of the key issues that facilitates in maintaining classism is simply not being aware of where to look for and what the problem actually is. So one solution to this is, instead of trying to solve the problem after it's already present, get to it at the source. This solution only applies to those that are unconsciously participating in classism through their socialization. Those that intentionally take advantage of the system that benefits them at the cost of others probably will continue to do so. This solution is aimed to change the way we tend to be socialized in regards to classism on smaller scales. Another potential small action that we could all take would be to change the language surrounding class. The way we speak shapes the way we see the world, and if the language we use does not represent the world that we want to create, that will only hinder us. Those that are in the dominant group are generally those that dictate what's popular and what's considered socially appropriate. This will emphasize changing how the general population treats language surrounding the oppressive behaviors leading to classism, which will also promote a change in the mindset. This can also be done in the classroom as a way of raising awareness, but should also take place in our day-to-day lives as we speak to both others in person or online. The drawbacks for this proposal is that it's highly dependent on how receptive people are to it. Since the entire idea depends on people taking it seriously, it's crucial that the implications of not following through with it are made clear. This proposal may work best combined with the first proposal for this reasoning. Lastly, one of the more long-term solutions that have been proposed and even enacted in some smaller regions and countries is reducing the class gap through a universal basic income. Research has made it apparent that reducing the gap in socioeconomic status would be more effective than simply increasing the minimum wage. In addition to addressing issues of automation reducing the demand for jobs, it can also aid in reducing the gap between the classes. If those below the poverty line had a living wage, they would be at that much closer to eliminating the small tells that end up reducing the opportunity they get in life due to the amount of money they have. This would be a more long-term solution, as getting these policies passed would take a long time and most likely would have heavy opposition. It's also not well known how exactly all of this would play out, as universal basic income hasn't really been tried out on a large scale before. Overall, classism and the systemic oppression that has existed in society throughout history has changed over the years, but still needs a ways to go before we can say that society is in a good place. With the small actions proposed, along with some long-term, more significant political movements, classism can become even less of an issue in our modern society.